Okay, so I think we have enough folks on the line to get started. Again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Candace Morrison, the Health IT Program Manager for the Office of Advanced Primary Care. Josh Schenkel, the CRISP Program Manager, and I will be presenting today. Next slide. All right, so before we begin, I want to take a moment to apologize for last Wednesday's mishap and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Quick housekeeping item, please stay muted until we open the floor for questions at the end of the webinar. And we are recording today's webinar session and we'll send the recording and slide deck to everyone who registered for the event. All right, so moving on to the agenda, today we will level set and briefly discuss the importance of quality reporting at MDPCP. We will then provide an overview of the 2025 and 2024 eCQMs. And then Josh will then walk through the CRISP eCQM reporting tool for the 2024 eCQM submission. And at the end, of course, we will have a live Q&A session for anyone who has any questions that need answering. Next slide. All right, so moving into the importance of quality reporting. The first reason is that quality reporting and monitoring of eCQMs are important to your success in the MDPCP program. When you sign the 2024 participation agreement, you agreed to meet the CMS requirement of reporting quality measures. And secondly, the success of the MDPCP depends in part on how well practices advance and maintain improvements in primary care throughout and across performance years. And lastly, at the beginning of the year, your practice and CTO may have received or will receive an at-risk performance-based incentive payment, also known as the PBIP or PBA. So to retain any part of this payment, you must meet or exceed the benchmark set at the program level. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with all of this. Next slide. All right, so next we will discuss the eCQMs for performance year 2025. So as you can see on this slide, the quality measures will remain the same for performance year 2025, including screening for depression, controlling high blood pressure, and diabetes glycemic status assessment greater than 9%. The diabetes measure name has changed, as I'm sure you're all aware, and the measure specification are similar, but not exactly the same. Therefore, we encourage you to review the specifications early on, so meeting the measures won't cause concern at the end of the performance year. Please pay special attention. The actual measure versions have changed this year, so please make sure that you are keeping that in mind when reporting in 2026. Also, just want to make mention, I'm sure you all are aware of this as well, the BMI screening and follow-up plan is the one measure you are not required to report in 2025. By now, everyone should have received notification from CMS about this measure being suppressed. Next slide. Okay, so performance year 2025, the PBIP is divided into three distinct components presented on the in the diagram on the right. The components are divided into parts. We have the quality component, which is what we're going to focus on today. You also have the utilization component and the efficiency component. So focusing on the quality component, this is further broken down into two parts. So you have the CAPS, which is the patient experience of care at 32.74%. And then you also have the quality components broken down at 67.26%, which are your eCQMs. So due to the suppression of the BMI measure, practices will automatically receive full credit for the BMI measure at 9.15%, and half of that weight of the measure will be redistributed among the three non-suppressed measures at 19.37%. Next slide. Okay, so as always, we like to provide you with the updated benchmarks associated with the eCQMs. They have changed considerably compared to the 2024 benchmarks. So please be mindful of your performance thresholds throughout the year. In detail, this benchmark list reflects the 4 eCQMs to which 3 measures must be reported, as well as the associated benchmarks and percentiles. Remember, the eCQM versions for Performance Year 25 differ from those of the Performance Year 24 eCQM versions. Please review each measure's data throughout the year and compare your values to the benchmarks listed here. If you meet or exceed the 50th percentile, you will receive partial credit for each quality measure. And if you exceed the 80th percentile, you receive full credit for each quality measure. Please note that no applicable benchmarks are associated with the BMI screen and follow-up plan measure due to the suppression of the measure. Next slide. Okay, so just want to pause here for a second to make sure that there aren't any questions on the 2025 quality measures. Okay, so we will move on to Performance Year 2024 eCQM reporting. All right, so moving on to the benchmarks. Presented here, we have the Performance Year 24 eCQMs and associated benchmarks. So just wanted to kind of discuss, how the benchmarks apply to your eCQMs in the PBIP. So to use as an example, screening for depression and follow-up plan measure. If your quality reports identify outcome results for the measure at 23%, you will not earn credit because your practice results fall under the 50th percentile. But after a couple of months of implementing a new process improvement plan and new workflows, the quality reports show improvement, and the results are now showing 65%. At that point, you will retain partial credit of the screening of depression measure because you have exceeded the 50th percentile benchmark. And same thing as it relates to if you perform at least 74.04% or better, you will receive full credit simply because you are above the 80th percentile benchmark. So I do want to remind everyone that remind users reporting eCQM on behalf of the practices that the diabetes hemoglobin A1C measure is an inverse measure. Therefore, the lower the number, the better the outcome results. Your quality score should be less than 19.44% to earn full credit for this measure. Okay, next slide. Okay, so just quickly, I have talked to this particular slide during CTO meetings in reference to eCQM reporting logistics. So everyone should be aware that the user access process for gaining access to the eCQM reporting tool has changed effective January 1st. And so essentially, what's important to know here is that the organization's CRISP HIE admin will be assigning users to the eCQM tile moving forward. So if a user does not have access to the eCQM tile, they should reach out to their HIE administrator. Those who already have access to the eCQM tile from the previous year, you would have automatically received access to the eCQM tile for this year. So there's no need for you to do anything. The HIE administrator, if for some reason the eCQM asset is not available for you to assign to users, please reach out to your CRISP outreach rep to get it assigned to your organization. And lastly, just want to make it very clear that the eCQM reporting period is from January 1st to March 31st, and there will be no extensions or exceptions to this particular deadline. Next slide. Okay, so before I turn it over to Josh, just 2 quick slides. So the 2024 eCQM reporting methods, you all are very familiar with this slide. Essentially, there's only 2 options to report out eCQMs. One would be manual reporting via the MDPCP eCQM tool. You do have 2 options of reporting within the tool, which is to report based on the practice level, and or you can report based on the individual provider MPIs. Also, the eCQM reporting via Metasoft platform is available this year, but I do want to mention that after this particular year, Metasoft will no longer report on practice's behalf who have participated in this particular project. So moving forward for performance year 26, 25 and 26, you will have to, these particular practices will have to begin to report manually. Next slide. All right.
Candace, before I start, I think there was a question in the chat. For slide 9, which I believe was about the eCQM benchmarks, Alma was curious if it's different for track 3 practices.
No, the benchmarks are not different for track 3 practices.
Okay. Alma, if you have any follow-up question to that, please feel free to put it in the Q&A tab. But with that, I can get started on my slides. So to complete your eCQM reporting, you will log into the CRISP HIE portal. I have the link there with, and then from there you would put in your login information, which is your email and then your password. Next slide, please. From there, you will select the MDPCP eCQMs tile. This is a different tile name than past years. In past years, we had eCQM, 2022 or eCQM 2023. We decided to change the name to MDPCP eCQM so that we did not have to change the name every year for the different years, that it can stay more consistent going forward. And then this will pull up, I believe, can you go back one slide, please? Thank you, sorry. And from there, you will be on the welcome page, and then you will be able to either click new submission to submit new measures for your practice and practices, or you can also view prior submissions that your account has made in this tool. Next slide, please. From here, if you click new submissions, you'll be able to enter your MDPCP ID. A change we've made for this year is you will not need to put in the track number before your ID. So for example, you are T1MD0000. You would not put in the T1 part. You would just put in MD0000. So that way, with your track changes, from year to year, we don't have to. There is no issues of entering your practice ID to be able to submit your measures. So that's a change we made for this year. Next slide, please. Once you enter in your information, this page should pull up with your practice details. If this page does not show up and you if it's saying that your practice isn't in there, please reach out to your outreach representatives so we can see what's going on. But once you pull up this page, it should include your MDPCP ID, your practice name, your address, your zip, and that information. Please confirm all that information is correct. If it is not correct, please reach out to your outreach representative so we can make some changes. If all that is correct, you would click confirm or continue, sorry. And then next slide, please. From here, this is when you would be able to submit for your measures. You would decide your report. We have the instructions up at the top. For example, the denominator must be equal to the initial population. The numerator must not be greater than the denominator minus denominator exclusion. So we just have some of the basic instructions up at the top that will prevent you from submitting if they are not followed. From there, you would select whether you're submitting for a practice or for a MPI. Next slide, please. Once you select that, you'll have all the measures. All measures and all fields are required. If it's a 0, just please put in a 0. And then for each of the measures, we have the description. You also can press the question mark button If you click on any of the question mark buttons, it will pull up the user guide for this tool, which will have more in-depth information. So if you have any questions, please refer to that. So you would fill out all these measures. Next slide, please. Um, and then if you were submitting for an individual MPI, you would select individual, and then you would just enter the 10-digit NPI for that provider. And you would do the similar process for the individual MPI. Next slide, please. And you can also add additional MPIs if needed by clicking adding the provider button at the bottom. Next slide, please. From there, you would click that submit button on the last slide, and then this would pull up. It will have your practice ID at the top. It'll have your ID. It will have your type of submission, and then it will have all the different variables that you submitted for. If you have any questions about what any of these abbreviated variables stand for, you can click on it on the blue link, and it will let you know what it is. So for like 2PP, for example, it's for the second or for the ECQ, the second eCQM measure for the population. If you look at that, it's similar for the rest. From there, you would attest if the information is correct, and then you would click submit. Next slide, please. Once you click submit, you will have a summary table that will have a summary of your submission. We recommend you print it or download it as a CSV, whichever is best for your practice, so you have it for your records for future use. Next slide, please. You will also receive an email with a CSV of your submission and letting you know that your submission was successful and the confirmation of that submission. Next slide, please. Okay, I don't know if we want to stop and take some of the questions in the chat before moving on.
Actually, let's just walk through this slide really quickly, and then we can go
Okay.
ahead and open it up. This is the last slide.
Okay.
Okay, so before we open up the call for questions, here are a few reminders and tips for making this a successful reporting year. So as a reminder, ensure you report a full year of 2024 eCQM data. If your practice has transitioned to a new AHR during performance year 2024, please include eCQM data from the old EHR in your eCQM submission totals. Again, the eCQM tool will be available for reporting between January 1st and March 31st. Also, just as some tips to help you with your submission, please validate that your reported data matches what is in your EHR. Save eCQM results via CSV file or print option for your records. And lastly, if you have any questions about using the eCQM tool, please refer to the 2024 eCQM reporting guide, which is linked here on this slide. All right, next slide. Okay, so before we close the webinar, we want to open up the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions in particular around the eCQM reporting tool changes or the eCQM 2025 eCQMs?
Candace, I think there was a question that I accidentally answered, but it was in terms of earning points for each measure. Even if practices fell below the 50th, they received points relative to how other track 3 practices performed.
Is that a track 3 practice or a track 2 practice?
Track 3.
Track 3. I would actually have to get back to you on that. Josh, do you have the actual person's
Yep.
information so I could reach out to them? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I would have to get back to them on that.
Okay. And then we got a request to see slide 9 again, which is the benchmarks slide.
Okay. All right. So, is there a question associated with these particular benchmarks? You can actually find these benchmarks in the Financial Methodology Guide, 2024 Financial Methodology Guide. Is there a question, Josh? Come up.
Um, no, I'm not seeing any. Just say follow up. Thank you for showing it again.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions people have?
I see Tashana has raised her hand. Tashana, you're still on mute. Tashana, I
I'm
can't.
not sure there's a way for users to speak the way it's set up, so she might need to put her question in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, they can't hear me.
Oh, oh, we could hear you
Yeah, I
there,
can hear you.
Tashana.
I can hear you, Tashana.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I was saying, I didn't realize that my hand was up. I do apologize for that, but I wanted to comment on what you were saying, Josh, about the CMS measure two. It's not necessarily I think your comment was the second measure that is reported, but it's the name of the measure. So two is the depression screening. So if you go back to that summary page, you can see like even on this page, they're all listed. So the number represents the measure itself, not the order of how the practice would report. So that too is depression, patient population, or depression numerator, depression denominator, etc.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. That is what I meant, but I might have not said it clearly. But so I appreciate you clarifying that.
No problem.
Okay. Do you have any other questions? Okay. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, please reach out to myself or Josh. Otherwise, we appreciate you joining today's webinar. And again, we will be sending out the recording as well as the slide deck. And we hope that you have a great day.